all of these other goals that we have for our life, like happiness, like close, intimate relationships, creativity, fulfillment, you can't quantify any of those things, but you can certainly quantify how much money is in your bank account at the end of every day. And so I think that's the other thing that makes these trade-offs sometimes really hard is like, well, how much happiness did I really miss out on by not going to this in-person yoga class and doing yoga at home on my own? I don't know. That's really hard to quantify, but I can tell you exactly how much I saved by not paying for the yoga class.
What does it mean to live a meaningful inner and outer life? And how do our personal finances fit in that? We tackle those questions and others in the School of Financial Freedom podcast. We talk about the role of money in our personal growth and spiritual liberation, the concrete math of budgeting and saving and investing, and how all this relates to the life you were meant to lead. Each episode is an interview with a former student of my online course, Financial Freedom 1, where they explain their favorite lesson and years later, what financial, behavioral, and spiritual impact it had on them. I'm Douglas Soy, founder of School of Financial Freedom, and your host. Glad you're here.
Hi, this is Lulu, and this is the School of Financial Freedom podcast.
Well, today we're actually going to talk about the very first lesson of Financial Freedom 1, which is about the emotional content of money and your money scripts. And the money scripts are the unconscious, mostly unexamined beliefs and attitudes we have around money that affect the majority of our behavior, and we don't even know it. So this is, the critical first lesson of Financial Freedom 1. I'm super excited to have Lulu here because she's going to have a lot to say about it. And quite frankly, the way I think about it is you can't really understand money without understanding your own personal money scripts. And you can't really actually understand yourself without actually knowing your money scripts. So this is like the crux of between, personal growth and your personal finances. So let me introduce Lulu. Hi, Lulu.
Hi, Douglas.
Lulu, tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I am an artist, a coach, and a product leader. Those are some nouns to describe who I am in the world. And I'm also someone who is always learning.
And well, first of all, I love the fact that you chose the identity of artist before everything else. When did you take Financial Freedom 1?
I think it must have been 2021 spring. I think that sounds about right. I remember it was definitely like thick of the pandemic.
Okay. Any big changes in your finances since then?
That's a great question. Not in terms of numbers or my financial situation, but in terms of how I relate to money, yes.
Amazing. So that's actually a great entryway into the lesson, which is about our relationships with money. Let's talk about the lesson. The lesson is about the emotional content of money and our money scripts. Tell us about what money scripts are.
Yeah. So to me, money scripts are these largely, kind of like subconscious. I think the way that you framed it was really, really spot on. Like subconscious beliefs and stories that we have about money, how we oftentimes make decisions, either explicitly about money or implicitly, as a lot of decisions are, in ways that are patterned, maybe automatic, and that are driven by like pretty strong emotional undercurrents that might not always be immediately obvious on the surface.
Yeah, our scripts come pretty early on from when we were raised. They come from our childhood, and oftentimes they're like intergenerational, right? Like they come not only from our parents, but even from what happened to our grandparents or earlier.
Yeah, for sure. This is something I've thought about a lot. How much of this comes from childhood. And, when I think about how my parents relate to money, and then also how my grandparents have related to money. I see kind of palimpsests of that in my own behaviors and attitudes towards money.
What was the word you used?
Palimpsest. It's
I
this.
don't. What is that?
It means, it refers to, you know how when you write on a piece of paper and let's say you're writing on it in pencil and then you erase it, you can still see the traces of what was on that paper.
That's an amazing word, Lulu.
Thanks. Yeah, that's the writer in me.
Okay, so yeah, my money scripts are a little palimpsest.
Yeah. Yeah, and in some ways, like, I think part of the journey is shining a light and making those like ghost writings more clear, or like, actually, like, okay, what is written here, right? What are the scripts that are written here that I'm actually following, and bringing awareness to what those are. And some of it is also trying to figure out, okay, that might be my inheritance in terms of how I relate to money. And what do I actually want to intentionally carry forward with me in the future?
Yeah, Carl Jung said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate.
Yeah,
And I
that's a
feel
great
like
quote.
I feel like that's so true with our money scripts. Like we have certain behaviors and attitudes towards money, and it keeps on showing up in the same patterns over and over. And we think it's just like that's the way it is, but it's just because so much of our own thoughts and attitudes are unconscious.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
According to literature, there are 4 main money scripts. Would you tell everyone what those 4 money scripts are?
Yeah. So the 4 big categories are money avoidance, money worship, money status, and then money vigilance.
All right. If you're willing, do a quick little explanation of each of them.
Yeah. So for money avoidance, and I think most of these are pretty like straightforward, or like they're kind of the meaning that you would expect based on the title. But yeah, money avoidance is, this can actually span like a whole range of actions and beliefs about money. But, um, you know, people who have this script, maybe you tend to believe that money is generally a bad thing, that people with a lot of money are greedy or immoral. Um, and yeah, maybe they also have this belief that like they don't deserve to have money. Um, and some of the emotions that come up around the script are generally regarding money, with a lot of anxiety, fear, distaste, like generally wanting to distance yourself from money. So that's avoidance.
Yeah, just a quick story about that. Um, I had an employee who I found out had student loans from grad school that she had never looked at in 10 years. And that was, to me, was like quintessential money avoidance, right? Like she knew that they were there, and she had a broad-based anxiety knowing that they were there, but she literally refused to look at them. And, I think the classic example of money avoidance is people who don't look at their bills.
Yeah, I think we'll get into this later with my own money scripts, but yes, I think those are some classic examples. Yeah, and then for money worship, so the second script, this is kind of maybe a bit of like the opposite a little bit of money avoidance, where you probably believe that money is the key to happiness and fulfillment and living a good life. Money will solve all of your problems, and kind of consequently that there's never enough money. If you have this script, you might work a lot to earn money, and at the same time, you might also kind of spend a lot of money. because you view that as as a way to get happiness and fulfillment and meaning.
Yeah, I feel like when you say that out loud, immediately my family comes to mind. Chinese immigrants who didn't have a lot coming here, and the idea that money equals happiness and will solve problems is front and center, and it's like the previous generation than me.
Yeah. I mean, this is something I kind of realized as an adult. When you like move out of your parents' house and then you go back and you see them, during the holidays, and you kind of have this new distance and kind of perspective on their lives. And I mean, I think especially for people in my parents' generation, so like my parents, they were kids during the Cultural Revolution. And
Chinese Cultural Revolution.
Yeah, Chinese Cultural Revolution. Exactly. And so, their parents, my grandparents, they were the generation that were really affected by that. They got, were forced to leave their homes in the cities and like go to the countryside. But yeah, I think for my parents and my dad, especially, who, he came from very, very modest background and didn't have much growing up. And for him, now that he has this like, middle class kind of lifestyle now, and in the States that he's worked really hard for, I think he views money as a way to enjoy and buy the things that he wants. And I've never heard him explicitly say that, but I think as an adult, as I kind of view how he spends money and where he gets meaning, like that's something that I feel like I've kind of picked up on.
My dad has explicitly said that. All right, next money script.
So the third one is money status. And this one is where the person kind of ties their wealth to their sense of self-worth. And they see those two things as very closely connected. And so someone with this script, they may be more prone to kind of signaling their wealth, or using money as a way to keep up appearances, to kind of keep up in general with like whoever they consider as their peer set, or maybe their aspirational peer set. And in general, like the kind of vibe here is like money is a way to impress upon others and myself of my importance or how much success I've achieved.
I went to law school, so I have a lot of people who wear the former classmates who wear the right clothes, live in the right neighborhoods, have really nice things in their apartment. And to me, that speaks to this money status thing, right? Like your kids go to the right schools, you go to the country club, whatever. Or if you don't have those things, you feel bad about yourself.
Exactly. And I mean, I think this one, especially in America, it's so like in the water that like, I think especially in the Bay Area, so San Francisco, where I currently live, I think it's probably the city with like the second highest number of like billionaires or something in the country. And at the same time, there's this like cultural norm of not projecting wealth, like not having flashy or quote unquote like ostentatious shows of wealth. But there are other ways that people signal their wealth. It's almost like it's like the understated, like buying brands that are less flashy, but still like if you know the brand, that's not. It's an expensive brand. It's just maybe not as flashy as some of the more traditional, like brands that we would associate as being like ultra luxury. So even in a place that's like kind of on the one hand is like trying to turn away from money status, it's still like buying into it in this just different way.
Oh, it's even more of an elitist way. Like one of the things I was reading about the costume designer of the HBO show Succession, and none, in that family, this billionaire family, no one wears labels, right? Because you have to have a certain amount of cultural knowledge to know that they're wearing super nice clothes. Like they're not even bothering trying to impress the hoi polloi, right? Like you have to be a billionaire to understand the clothes they're wearing.
Yeah, exactly. Extreme in-group signaling.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then the last script is money vigilance. And as the name of this one implies, these are people who, tend to have, I would say maybe like more anxiety or a desire to control their finances, and this belief that they really need to keep tabs on their spending, on what they're bringing in. They might be more frugal and cost conscious. If you have this script, yeah.
Yeah. Wait, were you describing me?
Do you feel called out by this one?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I say in the lesson is like when you hear your money script, you may be embarrassed by it, and yes, I am embarrassed when you read that out loud because that fits me to the T. I mean, I'm constantly thinking about money, and every money decision is completely fraught with me. Like going to the grocery store, should I buy the no-name brand or should I pay 20 cents extra for the one that has a label on it, right? Like every decision has some meaning to me.
Yeah, I mean, I resonate with this. Maybe to like reveal my cards here. So of these four scripts, I remember the first time I read these four scripts, the one that immediately was like, oh, that's me, was the vigilance script. So I think I very easily could see myself in this script. And it wasn't until later, actually, probably like last year, actually, that I realized I also have a money avoidance script, which is kind of like counterintuitive. I mean, it was really surprising to me, because it can seem a little bit contradictory. Like, how can you be both vigilant and avoidant about money, right? But these scripts are definitely like they're not mutually exclusive. Like having one doesn't mean that you like can't have another.
And just because they're in conflict doesn't mean you don't have them both either.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And for me, like how these two manifest, and kind of the big aha moment for me was, so as a little bit of context, like I think my journey with money and really interrogating my relationship with money kicked off in 2020 when I left. I call it W-2 world, but basically, like I left the world of working for someone else and to work for myself. And that really basically put my money vigilance script in hyperdrive. Like that was the first thing that happened because I no longer had steady, consistent income coming in. And like kind of what the like fight, flight, freeze part of my brain immediately did was, one of the reactions was like, okay, you have to like really turn the spigot off on your spending. Like that's the way that you're going to get control around your money situation or feel more secure around your money situation, because you no longer have these inflows. And in my mind, it's like it was, I don't know what was going to happen, but it was like, I absolutely could not spend more than I was bringing in, was this like implicit rule that I realized I had set for myself. And so the money vigilance script really kicked into hyperdrive. And for like a couple of years, I made decisions to cut back on spending that in hindsight, I'm kind of like, Lulu, what were you doing? Like they were just like pretty clear decreases to my quality of living. Like I like stopped going to yoga classes. I stopped going to therapy. So that was like kind of the money vigilance script really, really coming online. But then, like, about a year ago, and this whole time also, mind you, I was like thinking constantly about money, every decision, big or small, whether or not like it was explicit or not, like I was kind of making the decision based on money. But then I had this moment of like, wow, even though I stress and worry about money all the time, I'm actually kind of avoidant about it as well. Like, stressing about something is not the same thing as dealing with the issue. This was like my big light bulb moment. Um, um, but like, that actually helped me realize there was actually a consistency, because basically up until I left W2 World and started working for myself, the way that I dealt with money in my life, my strategy was, I'm just going to make more than enough money to cover my needs and my living expenses. And that way, like, I don't really have to think about it. Like, I know I'm okay. Right. And so that actually was the form of money avoidance, is I was like, okay, like, I know I'm making more than enough, so I'll be okay. And then as soon as that, I could no longer take that as the truth, then the money avoidance turned into endless rumination, anxiety, preoccupation with money, while at the same time not dealing with the root issue, really, of like, okay, how do I like start to have like just like a better relationship with this thing?
What happened when you realized that?
I mean, one thing that really helped was having friends, really, really good friends who, kind of nudged me to work with a financial coach, to just get more clarity on my actual financial situation. I mean, taking financial freedom was like, that was like, in hindsight, that was like very early on in my money kind of my learning journey with money. But I think that was also one step in the path. And yeah, I think just hearing reframes and different perspectives from other people around, I think this idea of like money is a tool. Ultimately, it's a tool to help you get what you want in life. Um, and this idea of like money as an investment that you can make in yourself, and that I'm worthy of that investment. Those are beliefs that I would hear, but I wouldn't really, like, I couldn't really open myself up to that actually being true. Like, there's a difference between like intellectually hearing something and being like, yeah, that makes sense, and then actually believing it at a more like visceral level. And so I think a lot of my journey has just been slowly, just starting to ground myself more in letting myself feel a bit more secure in my financial situation. And the fact that past Lulu did a really good job of looking out for present and future Lulu, and slowly starting to shift some of these beliefs that I have around money and what it's here for.
It's funny because, we're talking about money and like, net worth, but you're also talking about self-worth.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I think I mentioned this earlier, but like feeling like I am worthy of spending money on, like, that like me spending savings so that I can pursue a dream of being a writer and doing all of these different creative projects. Like, there is a part of me that's like, who do you think you are to live that kind of a life, right? Like, that feels so luxurious and privileged um, and just like a little like extra. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, so I think there's still a part of me that's definitely like feels like, oh wow, like that's kind of a lot. But believing that I deserve that. That's part of the journey.
Well, I think part of the whole thing with money scripts is it's not like you can never change them, but your awareness of them gives you more consciousness and choice, right? Like I think all of us will have whatever voices in our head about money that we grew up with. Um, and once we are aware of our money scripts, we can change our behavior.
Yeah, yeah. And in between the awareness of the scripts and then changing the behavior, in my experience, there's usually this really awkward, uncomfortable phase where you're just aware and you're unable to change. And it's just so painful because it's just like it's almost worse than the ignorance phase, right? Because at least when you're ignorant, you're just blissfully unaware and it's like, oh, la, la, la. But then when you're aware and you're also like, God, like I'm still going to make the habitual, right? Like choice here. That can oftentimes be like the most painful. And sometimes that phase is like for me, I feel like, so yeah, I mean, the vigilance stuff, like, yeah, I mean, I was really living with that and the awareness that I was like really under the kind of grip of that in this way that was not serving me. That was like multiple years for me. And so yeah, it's hard. But yes, I think aspirationally that's the move you're trying to make, right?
Well, it's so funny. I just recently bought a new car, like a brand new car, which is like so out
Congrats,
of
Douglas.
character.
That's huge.
And all the things you're saying is like I have some major buyer's remorse right now. Like, who am I to buy a new car? Like, it goes against basically everything I believe in. And one of the things I think about, Lulu, is you know the it's not easy to distinguish your money scripts from your belief, like the bullshit beliefs you have in your life from the actual beliefs and what is the right thing to do. Like, because I do believe in voluntary simplicity, right? And I do believe in environmental stewardship. And so, but I also recognize that I believe those things much easier because I have money vigilance.
Yeah, I mean, like what I'm hearing in that is like how do you balance sometimes like conflicting beliefs, but like simultaneous truths, right? Around like I can have these beliefs and values around voluntary simplicity, and it can also be true that getting a new car at this particular moment in my life is actually really going to serve me. And like, yeah, I feel like there's also this like delicate line that I feel like I'm trying to push up against or manage, which is like, yeah, like what's the difference between an action that you're taking that's like, um, like stretching your beliefs in like a growthful way versus, yeah, maybe like, co-opting them or like being like, like a betrayal of those beliefs. Does that make sense? Like sometimes like the line between
Totally.
those two things is not actually as clear as we would hope.
No, they're not clear at all. And, it's so funny because you can only imagine because you know me a little bit, Lulu. I spent so much time justifying the decision to myself. Like, oh, I bought an EV. So, like, it's going to be smart in the long run because I'll save, X amount of money on gas, or like the depreciation rate of this, like, or like, environmentally, I'm not producing. Like, I have so much dialogue in my head based on my money script. But I'm curious, you talk about this period of, you know, uh, I would call it embarrassment, right? And stuckness of like, oh, I can see my money script, but I can't change it. Um, how did you get from the point, and I'm genuinely curious about this, given what I just told you, how, how do you move from the point of like intellectual assent, like, yes, I know I'm worthy of spending money on, to emotionally actually embracing that?
Such a good question. I think Yeah, as I reflect on this, again, I go back to the importance of having role models in your life. I go back to a close friend who she signed up and went to this retreat that I was signed up to go in May 2020. Obviously, it didn't happen because of the pandemic. And so um, I was refunded that money that I paid for that retreat. But then when they opened up and started doing courses again, I couldn't bring myself to sign up again because by that point, again, I had left W2 world. I was working for myself. I was like watching my money on the level of like, yeah, I'm not going to go out to like watch this movie because, like that. So like to spend like thousands of dollars to go to this retreat, even though I literally already committed to it months before, like I just couldn't do it. And so it wasn't until this close friend went and did the retreat, came back, was like raving about it. She was like, oh, this is so amazing. And I was just like, okay, this is silly. Like objectively, like I can afford this, and I was so excited about doing it before the pandemic. Like the only thing that's changed is the fact that I feel this money scarcity. Right. And so like, that was a really kind of pivotal moment. Like, I feel like me committing to that retreat again, that kind of looking back, that was like the first step in allowing me to kind of like release the grippiness that I'd been having around money. And then like another thing actually that helped was I I I went on a walk and was actually talking with an ex of mine. We reconnected after I came back to San Francisco. We were just catching up on our lives, and I shared a little bit about some of the struggles I was having around money and like investing in personal growth stuff. And he said something to me that just stuck with me. He was like, "Yeah," he was like, at least when in the time that I've known you, when you do those things, like when you go to therapy, when you like go on retreats, he's like, I feel like those are really fruitful for you. Like they really help you. And it was like, I feel like it was kind of like just an offhand comment that he made, but it just helped remind me of like, oh yeah, it was like just really helpful to hear that reflection and that affirmation. So yeah, I think like having role models in your life, that's super helpful. And the other answer, which is less fun, I think, but I think very true for me, was just for me, given the extent, I think, of the vigilance script, I just had to experience a couple years of what living in this way felt like. And to be like, oh, this really like just and then multiple times saying to myself, like, Lou, like, what are you doing? Like 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 it just rationally this decision isn't making sense. And then emotionally kind of being able to see the impact of that, of like not spending the money on the thing that brought me happiness or that was like self-care. And just honestly kind of over and over again being like, this kind of sucks. At some point, I think I was kind of like, it doesn't have to be like you're doing this to yourself a little bit, right? But like sometimes it's all going to be specific. But for me, I think I just had to really um, experience that trade-off for myself for an extended period of time before I was willing to turn the corner.
You had to keep on learning the lesson until you're willing to actually take it in.
Yeah, or willing to acknowledge like there are things actually that matter more than your net worth. And this is the easy trap with money too, because it's something that can be quantified, right? So like all of these other goals that we have for our life, like happiness, like close intimate relationships, creativity, fulfillment, you can't quantify any of those things, but you can certainly quantify how much money is in your bank account at the end of every day. And so I think that's the other thing that makes these trade-offs sometimes really hard is like, well, how much happiness did I really miss out on by not going to this in-person yoga class and doing yoga at home on my own? I don't know. That's really hard to quantify, but I can tell you exactly how much I saved by not paying for the yoga class, you know?
Well, so that's, I can't get over that. That's so funny. I mean, you talk about the importance of role models, and our first role models are our parents. And palimpsest of your parents and their beliefs about money and your grandparents. Are you willing to tell a little bit more about that?
Sure. So I mentioned before, my grandparents, they were the generation, basically kind of the prime years of their lives, like 20s, 30s, kind of intersected with the Cultural Revolution in the 70s. And so, I mean, basically their lives were pretty much everyone's lives in China were disrupted in this very dramatic way. And for example, like on my mom's side of the family, both her parents were sent to kind of like rural outposts. They were living in Beijing. They were sent to these rural outposts. And so as a result, my mom and all of, her brother and her cousins in that generation, they spent most of their childhoods being raised by their grandparents, so my great grandparents. And I think for my grandparents, the generation that was kind of many of them who were living in the cities were sent to the countryside. When they finally were allowed to come back to their lives and their homes that they had before the Cultural Revolution. And again, I wish I had been able to talk to my grandparents more directly about their experiences, but in trying to put myself in their shoes, I can only imagine the sense of like relief that they must have felt at like being allowed to come back and resume, some semblance of a normal life. And at the same time, this sense of like precariousness of like in the blink of an eye, the government can issue a decree that just completely upends your life and you have no say in it. Like I think in America, it's so hard to imagine something like that happening, but for them to have experienced something like that, I feel like if I were in their shoes and I came back, I would have this trauma, right? Of like, oh my God, like at any moment the shoe could drop and like things could be completely different. And so, when I remember visiting my grandparents and staying with them when I would go back to visit China. And my grandmother, this is, again, on my mom's side, affectionately, I think you could say she was a collector, would be the nice way of putting it. But, she didn't throw anything away. Like you went into her apartment, it was like a museum of every possession that she'd ever owned. And, I think when I was younger, I thought it was strange. I remember like, my mom would she had feelings about it whenever she would be in the apartment. But now I kind of view that as like, that's one way that and again, I'm not sure if she had this tendency before the Cultural Revolution, but like, I'm kind of like, I think it makes sense that could be one potential response that someone has to that event happening, right? Of like, I'm holding down everything that I have. And I'm really trying to like feel that sense, build up that sense of security in my life again. So so that's kind of like my grandparents. And then for my parents, again, first generation immigrants to the States. When they came over, my dad, he had borrowed some money from my uncle, so my mom's older sister, when he came to the States. That was all the money that he had to start with when he got here. And so for them to go from that beginning to, this like middle class kind of life where they were able to raise two kids, it required an enormous sacrifice. And, I think, I definitely grew up with a lot of consciousness around like how hard it is to earn money, like how hard both my parents had to work to earn the money that they did. And the other big event, money related event that happened when I was younger was the dot-com crash. And my parents lost a lot of money in that bubble, in the subsequent crash. And I remember my mom saying something like, the money that we lost, we could have bought a house. And I think just the anguish that I picked up on from my mom, especially around that, instilled in me, again, this script of like, money is so hard to earn and it can be taken away in an instant. So therefore there can never be enough, because it could just all of it can just disappear overnight. So those are, I think that's some of the money stories that have come through my lineage.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I think that becomes a lot easier. It becomes a lot easier to see why you may not want to pay for a couple $1,000s for a workshop. When you have the echo of this behind you. And it's the other thing I find super interesting is, especially with your story with your grandma, it's super easy to see someone else's money script, right? It's much, much harder to see your own.
Yes. Yeah, I feel like most self-awareness or personal growth things, it's always easier to see the contents of the can from the outside versus when you're in the can.
Well, it's interesting because you talk about self-employment and you've become a coach, right?
Yeah.
Who do you coach?
Before I became a coach, I spent the first decade of my career in tech. And so a lot of my clients come from that world. They are founding and building companies. So I coach founders, I coach heads of engineering, product design. Yeah, I would say I think another kind of focus of my coaching is on a lot of actually what we've been talking about today, kind of like the inner mental game that we all have and are in a constant dialogue with ourselves about. So that's a very, I think, core theme of the coaching that I do. And then also interpersonal dynamics, conflict resolution is another kind of big focus area of my coaching.
You ever talk to them about money scripts? Or is it just purely professional?
No, I mean, I take a holistic approach to coaching, and I always tell clients the more of your life that you make available to the coaching, the more impactful it is. So I encourage that holistic approach. I think, yeah, money scripts are, they come up, they definitely come up, especially working with founders. Again, immigrant founders, especially, their approach to fundraising, to managing spend, all of these decisions related to how you allocate resources as you're building an organization, they're influenced by people's personal money scripts. So,
and we can't see that ourselves. It takes, again, someone else on the outside to be able to point that out to us.
Yeah, it's definitely helpful to have a kind of that, honest but compassionate mirror, right? Which I think is the role that a good coach plays.
One of the interesting things that I observe in our conversation is when you talk about the intergenerational scripts that you got. You talk about your grandmother and your mother, and I would be talking about my father or my grandfather, and so even gender is super tied up to all of this.
Yes, and I think we could do a whole episode just on this. Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting, right? Because in so many families, and I think this is across cultures, it's and again, norms are shifting, things are changing. But I think historically, right, the split is the father male figure is the breadwinner, maybe primary income earner, or at least the person who's bringing in more income. But when it comes to managing the household and the finances, that role tends to to go with the mom kind of figure in the family. Maybe because they're the ones also in charge of more of the daily kind of just responsibilities and tasks of running the household. Again, all these norms are changing, I think, in generally good ways. But yeah, I mean, I think that's probably an aspect. And then I think it is really interesting when it comes to like even dating and relationships and choosing a partner. Like, yeah, and again, yeah, this is probably it's multiple episodes, but
You gonna start a podcast on this, Lulu?
Yeah, just I'm at the life stage where like, yeah, friends are getting married, friends are getting divorced, friends are talking about, do we want a prenup? What goes into the prenup? And so yeah, there's a lot of interesting dynamics here.
One of the things I hear a lot from women students in the course is the role of the patriarchy in their personal finances, right? Like they get paid less, and there are all sorts of demands placed upon women that are not placed upon men, like having to dress well, how you present, like what your body looks like. And so their expenses are much higher than what you would presume for a man. So like it occurs to me that like the money scripts, our money scripts are not only about our parents, but they're what society has given us according to our gender or our race or our position in society.
Totally. Yeah. And I think like, I mean, for me, one of the biggest ways women are disadvantaged when it comes to money is just knowledge and the empowerment that comes from being knowledgeable about money. And that's why I think like a course like FF1 is so valuable and great, because it helps to demystify, right, a lot of these things around money. And yeah, I mean, I think like money in general is a hard topic for us to talk about, and for women there's this added thing where it's just not as normalized, like to talk about amongst each other. And so yeah, I hear this from my female friends all the time of like, yeah, I wish we would talk about this stuff more. Like I wish I had known XYZ thing about investments like 10 years ago, right?
Yeah, it's funny because I had a student once say that like one of the things she uncovered in her money scripts is as a young girl, she was told, I think explicitly or maybe just implicitly, like if you're a good girl, you don't have to worry about money, right? Like you'll be taken care of. And she said it's just a script that a lot of women in the United States have. Like if you're loved enough, someone will take care of you, and that's like incredibly damaging type shit there, right? Like so, she never learned anything about finances because she learned about finances. It was meant that she didn't think she was going to be loved.
Oof. Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. Okay. I hadn't really thought about like the kind of reverse implication of that story, right? Of like, it's not only like if you are good enough, you don't have to worry about money, but it's also weirdly, weirdly like if you are good at money or if you are knowledgeable at money, that means that you aren't loved. Oh God. Yeah.
Yeah, and as you say, things are changing. But it's funny because 80% of the people who take FF1 are women, and quite frankly, like oftentimes I think a woman should be teaching this class, not me. But this is my curriculum, so that's how it is. But I think boys more often than girls are taught like you're going to need to be responsible for this. And it's only later in life do women realize, oh, I'm going to need to be responsible for this. In fact, I can't control my life until I examine my relationship with money. So we're coming up on our time, Lulu, and so I have two questions. They're actually the prompts of the lesson. First question is, if you were in a lifelong, I mean, we're talking about dating, we're talking about money, and one of the questions in the lesson is, if you were in a lifelong relationship with money, how would you describe it? What would money say to you, and what would you say to money?
Well, we all are in a lifelong relationship with money.
Right.
So it's not a hypothetical. Although sometimes we might wish it was. So for me, I would say at this current point in my life, money would say to me, I feel like we're in like a better place. Like I feel like we have like a clear understanding of one another. There's less fear, like we're able to be in a bit of a closer intimacy or embrace. Um, that's kind of nice. And then, and I think money would also probably say like I still feel like there's some distance, avoidance, like suspicion you have of me, but working on it. And then, yeah, I would say to money, I'm trying to befriend you more, and I'm trying to see you as again more of like someone who's on my team who wants wants to help you realize your dreams and to be fully expressed in this world.
If you were in a lifelong relationship with money, and you are, could you say that you love money?
No, I don't think I'm there yet. Yeah, and love is such a big word. But I think that there's like a respect maybe, or like yeah, a respect.
Okay. Next question, the last question in the prompt is, what is wealth? What is wealth to you, Lulu?
I think wealth is being able to decide how you spend your time in a way that is aligned with your values and what brings you joy and fulfillment and meaning. Yeah, that's how I would define wealth.
Do you recognize that you're wealthy?
Yeah, I do.
So beautiful. Okay, tell people how they can find you if they want to reach out to you.
Yeah, I have a newsletter where I write about a bunch of topics related to personal growth. Actually, I have a post on there about money and money stories. So that's at lulucheng.substack.com.
Cool. Do you use vocab words that no one else knows?
You'll have to read to find out.
Okay, will do. Last question. What is your pitch for anyone to take FF1?
Oh, man. I mean, FF1 is really for anyone who wants to have a more intentional and expansive relationship with money. Yeah, and I mean, and this includes like if you just really want to like learn about the basics of personal finance, all the way, to if you're interested more about kind of the philosophical or even spiritual side of money, right? And or if you're interested in both, great. That's like because you'll find all of those things in this course, and it's also really lovely to go through it at the same time with a cohort of other people who are engaging in these questions. I think that's really encouraging, and yeah, I think it's a really unique perspective and blend on topics around money, in that it's this blend of like the practical and the spiritual, which I think is also could be a way of describing like the unique contribution and like essence that you bring, Douglas. So,
well, thank you, Lulu. It's really good to see you.
Same. I'm so glad that we were able to do this.
So for the audience, a couple of resources for you. First of all, you can find Lulu at lulucheng.com, and you could read her Substack at lulucheng.substack.com, where she'll wow you with her vocabulary. And if you want to take the next cohort of Financial Freedom 1, you could look at schooloffinancialfreedom.com and look at the course schedule. We've got another cohort coming up next month. I mean, I say this, and whenever you're listening, that's probably true, that there's a cohort coming up next month. So thank you all for listening. You've been listening to the School of Financial Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Douglas Soy. Thank you for tuning in to the School of Financial Freedom podcast, where we ask, what does it mean to live a meaningful inner and outer life? And how do our personal finances fit into that? We hope you enjoyed this episode and it helps you live with an increasing sense of empowerment, integrity, and agency in the world. For more information, resources, and to re-listen to this or any past episodes, visit our website at schooloffinancialfreedom.com. There you can find out when the next cohort of Financial Freedom 1, the online course is. If you've enjoyed today's show, please consider leaving us a review, as it helps more people find us and join our community of people interested in the intersection of money and personal and spiritual growth. I'm Douglas Soy, founder of the School of Financial Freedom. You can also find me on Substack, where you can subscribe to my popular newsletter, Money and Meaning. I also love hearing from readers and listeners, so write me at www.douglassoy.com. I'm grateful that you listened, and I hope that this episode has given